Today, I wanted to talk about several beads that I've been playing with. Got to working with these a little while ago and had some fun, so I thought I'd share that with you today. The first one is called a Buechler bead, or a Mobius bead, sorry. It was developed by a fellow named Mike Buechler many years ago. As I turn this thing, you can see it's got a kind of a different, very unusual, different shape to it. It's actually easy to make. A few tricks, and I'll cover those as we go. The next one I played with was this. Let me hold up this one. I started working with some different shapes, and kind of, the large beads are nice, but they get a little heavy and use a whole lot of clay, although I've got a lot of scrap clay. But I thought if I made them hollow, it might come out a lot nicer. And so I started doing that and have a nice technique for that. You can decorate them any way you like, as you can see. And so I've got several different patterns on there, canes and stuff, other stuff I've made. And I tried different shapes so that I've got a square as well as some round ones. I then have over the years played with these spiral shapes where I can actually get a bead that has got a nice little, almost a shell type shape to it. You can get those in different sizes, as you can see from these examples here. And then since I was playing with shells, I decided to go ahead and actually make something that looks a little like a shell and try those beads and see what they look like. So with that as where we're going, let me start with the Mobius bead. This was, as I said, developed by Mike Buechler, say maybe 25 years ago. And he did something that's actually quite simple, quite easy to do. Let me put that on a skewer so you don't get my fingers in the way. You can kind of get a better idea what it might look like. There was a hole starting there and going through. There we go, all the way through. So without my fingers in the way, you can see this bead, the sides come up, two sides come up and two sides go down, forming a nice little shape. And it makes a very nice bead. I did this one with a solid color just to kind of see if I could do it. Most people make them with using some canes or other patterns. I'll talk about that later. But basically, if I take a square of clay, and this is about a 1-inch square, and you really need soft clay. I've tried this with clay that's a little stiff and it tends to break on you. So if I take some soft clay and take opposite corners and push them up a little bit, then take the two other corners and start pulling them down, and just gently start pushing these things in the direction I want them. Now, if your fingers are a little thinner than mine, it helps. But you can see gradually as I keep warming it with my hands and stretching things and pushing and maneuvering it, I am slowly getting it into that shape we're looking for. For you mathematicians, I'm going for a hyperbolic paraboloid. For the rest of you, I'm just going for a saddle, and then I'm going to try and bring the points together. Trying to keep it somewhat rounded, and I find that having a round tool does help that somewhat as I try to keep this thing rounded as I then stretch it into the shape I want. And gradually and slowly bringing these points together, trying to keep it round as I go, and not forcing it too much because you are going to end up stretching the clay quite a bit to do this. What was a square when you started is not going to be a square when you're done, but that's okay. We don't want a square. What we want is a nice hyperbolic paraboloid shape. And gradually, I'm going to bring these ends together. And if I can bring them together at the same time, I will do better and get it more the shape I want. squeezing a little bit on the edges to kind of bring them in, shaping a little bit with my tool to kind of get the shape I want. And gradually I can bring these 2 points together, put a little bit of pressure on them so that they hold their shape. And now with some other tools, I can kind of round them out into the shapes I'd really like to have, so I get that kind of a bicone or the Mobius shape that we're trying for. Once you've got that, what we do is put our sharp things all over the table. Take the 2 points here, put a skewer through them, press it down. Now I turned it as I'm going so that I don't pucker the clay too much. Kind of keep twisting, so I've got more of a drill prop pattern going here than just pressing it straight into the clay. And I am distorting this as I go because I'm trying to do this on camera and it never works the same way on camera. And then try to come out where these 2 points come together on the other end. And as I get out there they comes out. Now I can probably do a little more shaping with this and get it back into the shape I'm looking for, because I did distort it as I was trying to make that, get the skewer through there. But there is my Mobius bead shaped and hung on a skewer. And I am simply going to put that in a bead rack, and I will be baking it later. In fact, all of the things we're going to make today, I'll put on one bead rack and bake them when this class is over with. So the next one I wanted to make was this hollow bead. And it is hollow, as you'll see in just a moment. So what I did was I went to the craft store, Hobby Lobby in my case, or Michael's or any other craft store. Most of them will have these dowels. Now this particular dowel is a 1/2 inch diameter dowel. And that is as big as I would make this thing. I might try 3/8 of an inch on the next round if I ever, when I do that. But I'll take a piece of scrap clay. In this case, I'm using black because I've got a ton of it. And I want to start with a sharp edge. I've already run this through the pos machine several times, so it's nice and soft and will roll up like I need it to. So I take my scrap clay, or it's going to be the inside, and no one's ever going to see that. So whatever color it is doesn't matter. It's up to you. If you do put something translucent over the top, you may want to consider that and adjust your inside clay accordingly. Anyway, I'm going to put that down. I'm going to give myself straight edges on this, just because it's the sort of a thing I do. And then I'm going to put my dowel on there and very carefully roll my scrap clay around my dowel, making sure I keep it rather tight. I don't want it to be loose on there. And once I get it around, I'm going to run it a few times, and you can feel when it hits the other edge of the clay. Take my blade. I've got a nice mark there. You probably can't see it, but I've got a little mark on there where the clay touched the edge of the clay touched the clay that was flat. Cut right along there with my blade. Now these two should come together nicely, and trust me, they never will. You're always going to have a little bit of a problem, a little bit of an overlap, the clay stretches or something. But I'm at least close enough now that I can bring these ends together as I go. Give myself a nice surface here, a nice seam. I do want to make sure that I get everything nice and smoothly together. I'm going to end up taking my ever-present clay tool, called my thumbnail, rub it along that seam to make sure I get a nice tight seal on it. Once I'm sure I've got a nice tight seal and can see that everything is down there tight, I've got that taken care of. I'm going to squeeze it just a bit to make sure I'm tight on the dowel. Now then, I need to make this into beads. And the problem I ran into first off, let me share with you that the human eye has got certain proportions it likes. Mathematically, it's called a golden ratio, if you ever hear of that. And there's some other names to it as well. But your eyeball has certain things it likes to see in proportion. And you'll be tempted to cut this bead to meet those proportions. But remember, this is going to be the inside of your bead. And so the bead is actually going to be just a little bit longer, but quite a bit wider than it is, which means your eyeball, when it's done, is going to see this and think, oh, that bead is short and fat. It ought to be taller or skinnier. Whereas this bead that I made with a different way is more in a proportion that your eyeball likes. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. And I actually cut this a little longer than I think I really want it to be. So I'm going to cut here. I'm going to put the blade here and then just hold the blade steady and roll this whole thing towards me. And I should end up cutting all the way through and come back to where I started with a nice smooth edge on it. I'm going to do that all the way along here until I see how many beads I've got made out of this. And I've got one more right here. So I can lay it down, roll it towards me. As long as I'm running in a straight line, everything will come out okay. Now, I could separate these a little bit if I wanted to. It doesn't matter too much. But I'll take this log and I'm going to put it in the oven. Now, the thing I learned is that I don't want to put it right on a tile when I put it in the oven. So I'm going to take 2 more blocks of wood I've got. I'm going to set them this way in my oven and bake it just like that. Now then, when it comes out of the oven, you'll have something that looks like this. Yeah, no, this is a lot shorter, but it comes out of the oven like this. And if you do it while it's still warm out of the oven, these things are easy to slide off. Now, if you let it cool, they sometimes stick a little bit and need a little coaxing to get off, but you can't get them off. And if the beads stick together like these two did, go ahead and take them off together. You've already got a cut in them. You might be able to see it. Yes, you can see the cut there. And with a little bit of pressure, you can just snap it right across there because you've already cut most of the way through. I now have the center for 3 beads. Having the center for 3 beads, doesn't matter which one I choose. I can then cover it with anything I like to cover it with. And I just realized I didn't bring something to cover it. Oh, I know what I'll do. Sorry, coming up with ideas as I go. I need to cover it with something. And for those of you who know me, understand that I'm probably going to cover it with something that's got mica in it, because mica is one of the things I like playing with. So I'm going to take a piece of that. That is bronze. I've got here a piece of Primo gold clay, which I'm then going to roll up, he said. Sure. My gold clay has gotten a little stiff, like me, but we'll roll it up. Probably going to need to run it through the pasta machine once or twice to get it to where it's going to be something I can work with. So give me just a minute while I run that through the pasta machine and see how badly it handles the machine. We'll run it through a few times just to kind of get it conditioned and in shape and convince it that I really want it to do something. Get it soft, a little malleable. This is one of those where neatness does not count, fortunately. Okay, I'm going to take my gold clay, and in this case, I'm going to roll it up. I'm going to squeeze it to make sure I get the air out. Also, keep it kind of warm because I need to manipulate it a little bit. And then at this point, I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to seriously twist this clay. And teaching mica techniques wasn't part of my intention, but we'll cover it anyway, just to kind of get it taken care of. That should be about all I need. Now with that, press down on one side, so I've got an edge here, kind of a pointy seam that I'm going to put into the epoxy machine this way. Run it through the epoxy machine quickly, and we get something that doesn't show up in the camera. There are lines and striations in this clay now that will give me a kind of a nice effect. I'm going to take that, I'm going to lay my bead on there, give myself a straight edge to work with, and see how much of this I'm going to be using. By the way, this is about the medium setting on the epoxy machine. Okay, got more than enough clay. So I'm going to cut some pieces off, set them aside. Take this. I've got the gold clay a little bit past my bead, but that's okay. I just want to make sure I get things where they're going to work. A little excess clay here, cut that off. Now, in order to adhere the unbaked clay to the baked clay, I need to put a little bit of liquid clay on there. And I want just the very smallest amount. If I get too much on there, things are going to slide around. I'm just using this to provide sort of a bond between the baked and the unbaked. You see, I've got just a very little bit on there. Spread it out. It's going to be just slightly tacky, but it will give me a very nice bond between the two. Now, one problem I'm going to run into is where I bring this around, I'm going to end up with a seam. To hide the seam, what I'm really going to do is take my gold clay and cut it on a diagonal. I could do this on the flat surface, but that's okay. I'm going to cut this thing on a diagonal and peel off this piece. Clean that edge up just a touch because I've got a little bit of piece of clay right there that didn't come out. I'm then going to cut a strip off of this clay, which is actually a bronze that I've treated the same way. So I got a nice mica effect on it. And I'm going to put it up against that gold. And wrap it around. And press it up against there so I get a nice tight seal with the gold clay. I need to make a small adjustment here. There we go. That should bring it up together so that I still don't have it. I'm having way too much fun with this. Let's try that one more time. If this doesn't work, I've got another option, but we'll see how this goes. Okay, got it that time. I'm going to take the gold once more, wrap it around, see where my seams fall. Try to cut it in a way that is going to nicely fit. And it doesn't, because my eyeballs don't work. So we make another cut. Unfortunately, I had to cut it too long instead of too short, which is always a good thing to do. Now I should be able to bring it around. Somehow I've really, fortunately it's clay and I can stretch it just a little bit and see if I can fill in this little piece here that is going sideways. If it doesn't fill in, I've got another plan that I'm going to put in there. But anyway, we'll get that taken care of. So I've now covered this bead, and if I wanted to, I could put another wrap here and put some more bronze in there just to kind of give it a little better effect. And I said the ends were too long, which it was okay, because what I'm going to do is come in and clean up the ends of this so that they now fit. Trim them up nice and smooth. Got a small little divot right there that I just created. I've got a little piece of gold here that I'm going to put right in there to hide my mistake and bring that whole thing together and clean up what I just did, making sure I'm using the sharp edge of the blade, because I'm a bad habit of using the dull edge and putting the sharp edge against my finger. I now have this bead put together. You can see it's hollow. So it's very light. It's got nice decorations on it. And all I need to do now is put some sort of an end cap on there, which is easy to do because I've got a circle cutter that is approximately the right size. So I can cut a circle of clay out, put that on there. And if it is a little too big, I can go ahead and take one of my clay blades, which I cannot find on my hand, there it is. Take my X-Acto knife here and cut around the base. Make sure I get a good fit between the end cap I made and the base that I was working on. And I hope I haven't put my head in the midst of the camera. I was looking at the top of my head is not any fun, but you do want to see what I'm doing here. And then take that up. I've got a little bit of a problem here, which I'll clean up right there. Trim that off. Clean up this guy. Coaxing back to where he needs to be. I now need an end cap on the other end. Should be able to work with the same circle cutter because it was close enough. Put that end cap on. And this time I'm going to try something a little different. Don't try this at home. It's very dangerous. I'm going to try and cut through this clay while I'm holding it in my hand. Maybe help everyone see what I'm doing. That's not working. Sorry, guys. We will go back to my technique of cutting it on the surface, on my work surface, which is easier to do and gives me a much cleaner cut. And there we are. Now I've got that cut made. I'm going to clean that up just a touch. They've got a little piece here that is hanging over this side. There he is. Okay, got that. And now I've got my bead. And the way I'm going to bake this is, again, the same technique. I'm going to take one of my little skewers. They are tiny, aren't they? And I'm going to find the middle of this, something really close to the middle. I'm going to put that skewer through there. And once I've done that, I'm going to look at the other end and look at where the middle is and put my finger there. And that's where the pressure is going to go, is towards my finger. And as I get close, I can feel the end coming through and make small adjustments to it so that I don't, so they get it close, very close to the center when it comes through. Now there are a few things here I need to look or to worry about. One of them is I got a piece of clay where it doesn't belong. Check some of the seams to make sure they're tight again. I'm going to clean up the ends when I'm done, so I'm not going to worry too much about that, the end caps. I'm just going to bake them. And again, this guy will fit on my bead rack just the way it is. It's not so heavy that when it bakes, it's going to distort. It's not going to bake and change shape or sink in there anyway. And actually, I've done this enough that it actually comes out holding its shape in the bead rack, which is nice. Other things you can do with this, and I wanted to do this just because I want to do this. But several years ago, many years ago, another polymer clay artist named Paul Sutton developed a technique which has been called the Sutton slice. He takes a rubber stamp, and this is just a standard, simple rubber stamp. If I think about this, I'll remember where I got it. And this is probably from Lisa Pavelka, one of her first stamps. And you can push clay into it. Now, people will tell you there's lots of ways to push the clay into it, and everyone says their way is the right way, and so I'm not going to tell you how to do that. But just, you want to get the clay in there. One easy way, one way I do is I'll simply put the clay on there and push. Now I've got some fairly strong arms, and I get the clay really warm because my hands are warm, and so I can get it forced in there. Some people will tell you need to push in small pieces of clay at a time. Whatever works to get the clay in there is fine. I sometimes will take a roller and roll over it. Now, if you do that, start in the middle and work your way towards the edge. Because if you start at the edge, the roller is going to pick up the clay and pull it off the stamp, which is not what you want. You want the clay to be on the stamp and embedded into the stamp. For the most part, I find that just pushing the clay with my fingers like this, pushing down onto the clay, gets it into the stamp. Now, the real trick here is you want to shave, once you've got the clay pressed well into the stamp, what you want to do is shave the top layer off the clay, leaving just the clay embedded in the stamp. And I have found that that works best if I take it in small cuts. So if I start out here near the edge and just shave the clay, and I don't even need to shave it all the way down on the first pass. Take a couple of passes, make sure you don't pull up too much, go in with a shallow angle, and as you do that, you will start cutting the excess clay off the top. And now don't worry about cutting the stamp. If you go in at a shallow angle, you won't shave it too much anyway. But more importantly, these stamps are cured at a very high temperature and under a lot of pressure. And so the rubber is actually fairly hard and is not easy to cut. And so you can do this several times. And I don't know if you can see it. I'll hold the stamp up in a bit and let you see what has been left behind from what I'm shaving off. And I am trying to get it fairly smooth, what I cut off. And I can see that I've got a piece here that didn't quite take. So I'm going to put the clay back in there and shave it again to see if I can get clay in that little spot. Yes, that came out. And I'm going to keep doing this until I get a big enough patch of clay that I can do my next step, which is probably going to be most of this because I don't really know how much clay I need, which is sad because I should be able to figure that out. However, we're going to keep going here, shaving a little bit of the clay off the surface and keep shaving it down to where I get to just a little bit of clay left inside my surface. Let me shave that last little piece off. And I've got, now, again, I don't know if you can see this. There is the brown you see there is actually clay embedded into the rubber stamp. So now then the trick is, how do you get it out of there? I'm glad you asked that question. I'm going to take some of my gold clay. Take some of my gold clay, and I'm going to run it through the pasta machine. Yes, gold clay. Get it to where it's going to go through the pasta machine. It's going to it's getting stiff on me again. So it's going to take a little bit to get it through there. So I'm going to have to run it through a couple of times. And the thing is, you got to keep talking while you're doing this. Okay, I'm running it through on about a medium setting. In fact, about everything I'm going to do today is done on the number 3 setting on my pasta machine, which is fairly close to medium. I think it goes out to about a number 7. But I need this clay to be fairly soft, and I have learned the hard way, because you're going to be tempted to put the gold clay on the stamp and peel it off. Don't do that. It works better if you put the gold clay on your work surface, or your background clay on your work surface, and then put your stamp face down so the section with the clay on it is pressed against what's going to be your background clay, and then press down firmly. Try to make sure you've got contact everywhere. And now you want to peel the rubber stamp off. And by that, I mean, I'm literally going to take the rubber stamp and bend it horribly. So you see, I'm actually rolling it off, because that opens the rubber stamp up so that it's going to tend to release the clay more than it did before. And as you can see, as I'm doing this, magically that clay that was on the stamp is now transferring to my gold background clay. And if things don't come off, if not everything comes off, I can see it's not coming off sometimes, I'll roll it back and press it down a little more, and then come back and try it again. And eventually you're going to get almost all the clay transferred from your rubber stamp onto what I'm calling the background, or the gold clay in this case. Now this is going to be another one of my beads, so I want a clean edge. So that's going to be my clean edge. And I need a clean edge over here. a clean edge over here. The rest of it, we'll take care of it later. Now, at this point, let me tell you that you have pressed your background clay, or the gold clay in my case, firmly onto your work surface, and it is probably stuck there. So you'll find it's going to be easy if you just take your blade, slip it under there, and work your background clay off that blade, or off the work surface. Now you can take one of your beads, one of your hollow beads, I think that's a little too big. Let me take, oh well. I made some square beads as well as round beads, just to kind of see how it would go. Let me show you a square bead. I'll go ahead and do that. So I've got this clay. I have here a square bead. It goes on the same way, which means I need to put my liquid clay on there. Let me see if that's enough liquid clay. Okay, we got liquid clay on there. I'm going to put this edge, I'm going to put it right next to one of the corners, because I'm going to have to shave a little bit of that off. I'm then going to run this around and around and see where it comes out. Like I said, I'm going to have to shave. I knew I was going to have to shave this a little bit, so he gets shaved right along there. Clean up that end. Bring this guy around. Find out where things need to be cut. Put my cut in there as appropriate. Then bring him back. Seal up my seam. So I've got that now. And again, I need to come in and shave this guy off. I've got a lot of excess clay there. So let me try and figure out, guess where. And I came in a little high, but that's okay. We can adjust as we go. And press that into the background, into my square base. Trim this guy off. And I now have a square clay, or a square bead. And I've got liquid clay all over my fingers, so things are sticking to them, which is a problem. Okay, having cleaned that up, got a mess of clay here that I was going to use for other things. But that's okay. Well, let me clean up my work surface just a minute. So I need end caps on that. So I'm going to take my gold clay, run it through the machine a few times to get things cleaned up, uniform. Give me a nice surface there. See how big this needs to be. I can just put that guy on top and look at it and cut it along the edges. I know I've got a not quite square bead, but that's okay. Well, I can clean that up in just a minute once I get him trimmed up. Whoops. Got him on there. Make sure he stays on this time. Okay, now that I've got him staying on, I'm going to come in and trim this up so I get nice clean edges on this, just to make it pretty. Because I know my wife's going to take it when I've got it finally baked and finished. And clean up this little corner here. Okay, got a nice bead there. Do the same thing on the other end. Got a pressed in a little bit on that side, so if I poke through and push it out, it'll pop out and we'll be okay. And again, we do the same thing for the other side, coming in, trimming it up. This time I'll remember to press down on the edges so that he sticks. I can then come in and clean up these edges a little bit. I say if it comes to it, I can always take a little bit of sandpaper to this thing once it's baked and clean this up, just to clean up this end cap a little bit more. And you should always use the sharp edge of the blade when you're doing this. It actually cuts a whole lot better than the dull edge. Not that I've ever done that in the last 5 minutes. Okay, if I wanted something a little bit more decorative on that, I could actually take a piece of black clay, and just to be different, I might be able to take a small circle if I had a small circle cutter here. I want to try a circle. Let's see what a circle looks like on there. We cut a small circle out of that. If I put that small circle on there, I don't think I like that, the looks of that. We won't go there. Let me see if I can come up with a small square. See what that's going to look like on there. So if I take something that's about that square, maybe square. See what I think of that on there as an end cap. I don't think I like that either. I'm going to leave. You can actually put some layers on this, and I've done that on a few of my end caps, but I don't think I like it on this one. Anyway, again, at this point, I'm going to take my skewer, identify what looks like the center of this bead. And again, I'm drilling into it so I don't pucker it too much. I don't cause too much of an indentation. And there I'm through. And I'm going to put my finger where I think is the center over here. And I can feel it coming through. You can probably see it poking through. Yeah, on the camera you can see it. It's poking up. I haven't penetrated yet, and if I pull back, it'll go away. So I can, once I'm certain I like where it's coming out, I'll go ahead and again, doing the drill technique to minimize the pucker, drill through that thing. And I've got another hollow bead, which I will also put onto my bead rack, which I keep dropping. And so I've got my beads lined up there. Having done that, that's the Mobius bead we did first, and then a hollow bead next. I'm going to start moving on to the twisty beads, or my shell type beads. Dropping stuff all over the floor. Hope it's nothing I need. For this, I'm going to initially demonstrate this with just gold clay, but I will move to other things to show some other possible decorations you can do to these things, offer some ideas. But I want to start with the gold to give you, so I can use it to point out some of the possible pitfalls and some directional advice that things I have learned the hard way, because I've tried this several times. Let me again condition my gold clay. Going through this on the medium setting on my pasta machine. And I don't know why I'm losing conditioning on my gold clay. It usually doesn't go this rapidly, but today we're having trouble. As is always the case when you start doing a demo, things never go right. But moving on. Okay, I've got some gold clay conditioned. I'm going to cut a section of this off. And I can tell you right now that that piece that I've got there is way too much clay for what I want to do. So I'm going to cut it back, well, let's say here, which I think is probably still too much clay, but there's a point I need to make anyway, so we'll try it. So I'm going to start with a piece of clay. It's roughly 1 inch by maybe 3 inches. And I'm going to just roll it up, hiding from you what I'm doing. So I've got it rolled into a simple log, being attacked by beads now. What I'm going for is this bead here. And it's rather easy to make as you think about it. What I'm going to do is just taper the ends of this thing and make it fat in the middle. So I'm kind of rolling it so that the ends are tapered and the middle is fatter, because I want narrow on the ends and more stuff in the center, a little fatter section in the center. So it's got some nice shape to it. And I have learned myself that I tend to make the right side a much different taper than the left, which causes innumerable problems. If I think about it, I should just flip it over and make the left match the right. See how that goes. Probably not well. It's an idea. Okay, I've got this thing laid out that way. I have here, this is a bamboo skewer. Bought it probably at one of the cake stores or baking shops. I don't bake, so I don't know what they use them for, but I got it there. I visit there frequently because they've got all kinds of nice stuff to play with. Now then, I'm going to start and attach, just hold this end on the rod and then start rolling. And I usually roll the other way, but for the audience, we'll do it this way so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm just rolling the rod, holding the clay, and twisting it onto the rod as we go, so that we get something of a nice shape to it. And as we go, it's nice. The reason you want clay that's soft and not stiff is if you have clay that's stiff and you try this, it will start splitting on you and you will get cracks and breaks in it. But I can then get the shape, and you can see as I am tending, as I really like to do, I have made one end much more tapered than the other. Someday I'm going to figure out how I do that, but that doesn't matter so much. It's not a bad shape for a bead. It will look nice, especially if you hang it this way. But in this case, it doesn't matter. I am once more going to put this on one of my skewers or one of my beading rods. Add that to my tray over here. Put everything back to where it's supposed to be. and move forward. Now, if you want to try something different, the difference between these pieces is that this guy was obviously made with a much shorter piece that was a little bit fatter. And so it very few wraps and it came out quite fat. These guys are made with my usual tapering one end more than the other. Someday I will figure out how to get them tapered the same. But again, fairly longer, much longer piece. And so that comes out with a much different shape, much longer bead. So if you want a shorter bead, you want a shorter piece of clay, a longer bead, you make a little really long, this bead. This piece of clay was way too long. And so I got a really long bead out of it. Now, one thing you can do, and I did this, is to take your clay, and this time, taking my clay like this, again, being who I am, I square it up. I don't know if there's a real reason for doing that. It simply gives me a nice piece to work with at the beginning, so I know exactly how things are shaped. I can have some control over what's going to happen. Roll up one end. You can see I'm just kind of rolling one end there. And as I go, I will roll it into a log. It's getting stiff already. And I am going to then roll that log a little bit to kind of smooth it out. By the way, you'll notice I do put my hands at an angle when I'm rolling. If I roll this way, I find that my knuckles tend to put ripples in the clay, so it lump. You know, I get bumps in the clay as I go. If I do it this way, I don't tend to do that because my fingers are now at an angle, and so I get different pressure in the clay as I go along, so that I get more of a flat shape to it. One thing I've done also to kind of help get a flat shape is I sometimes will take a block of wood like this and use that to roll the clay, except in this case, my block is too small. But really all I'm trying to do is get the clay to stick together, get it into a nice shape. I'm then going to start rolling it on just one end, and I'm actually going to push it towards the other end because I want the other end to be fatter as I go. My clay is getting stiff on me and not wanting to do this. Come on, behave. You see it's already breaking up. I've got holes and gaps. And as you do this, it's going to want to, simply because I'm putting a taper on it, it's going to, instead of rolling straight, it's going to want to roll at an angle. It's going to want to roll in a circle. That's okay. That's what you expect to happen. But now I've got one end fat, one end skinny, and I should end up with this shape when I'm done. So I'm going to try that and start my bead here, hold it down with my thumb, and roll it up. I was thinking of a conch shell when I tried this. I'm using gold clay just to keep things simple so that I've got the same thing everywhere. And I know how well this clay behaves. You can do this with about anything you want. Hopefully I will show you that in a minute. I say hopefully because I'm not sure how well it's going to work. Don't ask me why. I just like a nice depression in the end of this. It's just something, it's my quirk. I think the conch shell is open, so probably and thinking I need to have it open. Anyway, that will give me a bead of that shape. Had I made the fat end fatter, it would have come out more like the one I've got on the table. And I'm going to add that to my rack. One other bead I'm going to play with before I start into an experiment that I'm thinking about trying. I'm going to take a little more clay. And this time, I told you my hands are warm. I can actually hold clay in my hands and get it to be quite malleable. So I'm going to do that for a moment. See if I can get it to behave and do what I'm wanting it to do. Because I'm once more going to roll one of these cones. And I've picked up a little stray clay, which is okay in this case. I'm adding a bit of a twist to my cone simply to add a little bit of interest to my final product. I'm going to push this end down because again, it's supposed to be open because that's where the critter comes out of the shell. So roll that a few more times. Now that I've got this nice conical shape to it, I'm going to take this end and just roll it out. Start from this end and just start rolling. And as I keep rolling and putting some pressure on there because it's tending to break on me, which I very carefully hid using some bronze clay, so you can't actually tell that it's breaking on me. But I'm going to roll this thing up until I get more of a snail shape to it. It's like the last one, only instead of rolling it around a skewer, I'm just rolling it up into a more of a snail shell type shape. It's tight in the middle, fatter on the edge as it goes out. Because I picked up some odd colors of clay, you can see it actually has different striations in it. I've got a few spots where the clay broke because it's a little stiff. Must be from the hot lights in the house. And anyway, we'll clean that up. And now I've got this shape, which I will once more do my favorite. I decided I wanted to hang it probably that way. So I'm actually going to start on the small side because it's easy to come out the big side. But if I start on the big side and try to go through, there's a chance I'm going to get it off center and I'm going to come through the side of the small side. But if I start on the small side, then I know I'm centered on the small side. And if it gets off center, no one's going to know when it comes out the big side because it's got a lot more area there. And again, drill as you go because it will minimize the amount of puckering and the amount of distortion that you experience. And there it comes out on that side, and it came out pretty close to where it needed to be. Again, putting my finger there to help ensure that it comes out where I want it. And I've got one more bead. There was one other thing I was going to try. Well, I'm going to have to test this a little bit before I do it to see if the clay is really up to, nope, it's not. I can tell right now the clay is brittle, it's old. But my idea was that I could take this blend I have, and I need to work on it quite a bit. You can see it's old and stiff, but I thought I would take this blend and turn that into one of my shells. Unfortunately, I can tell right now it is too stiff and it's going to take way too long to get it conditioned. So I don't have time here and you don't really want to watch me do that. So we'll just pause for the moment. Okay, to continue where I left off, what I've done now is I've created a blend of clay that goes from a bronze color on this end to a gold color on this end. Now, what I want to do is the same thing, roll that up into a log, roll it out, and then I've got options here. First off, I'm going to take this one and taper the ends so that I'm doing pretty much the same thing as I had done with the long guys. Try to make this one short and fat instead of long and skinny. And let's see how this looks when I'm done. So as I go, and again, knowing that I tend to make the right side not as tapered as the left, I'm going to try and put a little more taper on the right side so that it now is overly tapered. And I'm going to take my skewer, take this guy and put him on my skewer and roll him up. And let's see what that thing looks like when we're done. One should never do in a demo something they haven't tried off camera. And so we'll see what this looks like because I haven't done this off camera. And I'm going to try and stretch him out just a little bit because I want that end to be a little bit more tapered. You can see now I've got a bead that is the grades from gold here to a bronze on that end. So just an idea. You could actually take some canes and roll them up and use them for this. You can put several colors in there. You can put patterns on your clay. There are many ways of decorating these beads that will make them come out into some very nice, pretty looking beads. I'm getting quite a collection here. Put that on my rack. Let's see if I can, what's going to, no, those guys are going to touch. You got to be careful when you start doing this because if I get the beads touching when they bake, they tend to get stuck together or get some odd flat spots on them, none of which I want. So I'm trying to keep everything from touching anything else. And still look nice and pretty when I'm done. It needs a little bit of touch right there. Anyway, those are some of the things I was doing, playing with beads, making beads, trying to come up with all kinds of different ways of things to do with beads. Like I said, most of this is done with gold. I hope to do it with a turquoise to magenta, but that is not going to happen today. I need to work on those guys a little bit more to try and get them blended. There's lots of other things you can do. You can marble some of the clay and make these same shapes and come up with some very interesting patterns to it. In fact, let me just go ahead and do that. If I take, again, the bronze and the gold, because it's what I have handy, and I'm just going to marble them up quickly here. Although I can tell you right now, they are already deciding they don't want to do this, but that's too bad because they are going to marble because I want them to. And with my warm hands, that will eventually work itself out. So get these two to where they're roughly the same size and shape. Get them set up that way. I'm going to roll them again just a few times to get them together and to get them warm. Put a twist on them. Put a lot of twist into them. You got to be careful doing this because if I put too much of a twist, I'll get them blended, and I don't want to do that. I'm just trying to get things marbled a bit. And I'm actually making another bead shape that I'm really not thinking about making. So I've got this guy kind of into a nice marble shape. And this time I'm going to go with my snail, I think. I think this guy should make a nice snail. So we'll do this, putting him into a spiral. Get this in nice and tiny twist. Ooh, that's a nice spiral on that. I like the way that marble came out. And then I'm going to start just do what I did before and take this end and roll him up. Being careful as I roll because I don't want to put too much stress on it so that I don't cause him to crack. I'm using my thumb and fingers to open the end up as I like to do. Take one of my tools and poke it in there. Wrong tool, try another one. Poke it in there. So that I get a nice cavity formed. Tweak him a little bit so I get a better spiral. And I've got this nice bead. Again, I'm just doing this for ideas. And then I'm going to want to draw the skewer through right about there. So I'm going to find the midpoint here. Got a crack forming, so we'll seal that up. Start right there. And again, with the drilling motion and aiming for about where my finger is. And with my finger there, the pressure will kind of force things into that direction and come out the other side right there. And I've got a bead with some character to it. So I don't have to use just gold. So those are some of the beads I've been playing with this last month. I wanted to show that to everyone. Hope you enjoy.